be sure to go back and watch this content creator's post. She talks about, how to tell if a man is broke. And one of the things that she talks about is a man will ghost you because he's broke. And I'd like to expand on that. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. I've been counseling women and men who've experienced abuse, as well as those who have been perpetrators of abuse and other violent crimes. And again, please be sure to go back and support that content creator. She has a great post, but she talks about in her video how a man will ghost you because he's broke and he can't keep up the facade of having money. And I'd like to expand on that and elaborate in that, because I think there's so much to talk about in terms of dating culture. I think he will ghost you. I think ghosting you because he's broke is only part of that. I think the other half of that is because he's a pathological liar. So usually, in my experience, and I've worked with a number of men, so I feel qualified enough to tell you this, and I've worked with a number of men that I know who've done this kind of stuff. And so usually when men who are broke, it doesn't just, the lie isn't usually just around money. The lie is usually around their entire life. And it could be sort of an elaborate scheme. And it might start out as something minor, when you're on the app or when you're conversing with someone and they're telling you, how old you are, and maybe they're a little bit deceptive about how old they are. And it can start out small like that. But usually what ends up happening is men who lie about not having means are usually lying about their whole life. They're usually lying about their career. They're lying about the money that they bring in. But in recent times, there's been men who have, been more elaborate, specifically around the car that they drive or where they live. And so they might date what a lot of women are experiencing, is when they date men, and men who will bring them to their house. A lot of women are finding out that the man is not actually bringing them to their house, but he's maybe bringing them to a friend or a relative's home, or I've even heard of women being brought to Airbnb. So he might rent out an Airbnb for the night. There are men who lie about, they're lying about their name. So that you can't research them to, look them up and see who they are and things like that. So they don't want to be found out. And so the lie is usually much more elaborate than, I'm missing a few dollars in my bank account. They make up an entirely different identity. Some of these men can be married or be on child support, so that a lot of them may have children and things like that they're lying about. There was recently a story that went pretty viral on social media. I think it was maybe a couple weeks ago, about a man who had been hiding children in the double digits. That's how many children he had that he hid, and none of the women that he was with knew about. But, so they could lie about, that. He could lie about criminal offenses, so having felonies and things like that on his record. So usually it's not just the fact that he might be low on money, or he might be working a less than stellar job and not having the money or having the means that he portrays to do. That usually the lie is much more elaborate, and there's a lot more that goes into it. And honestly, he can be a downright dangerous criminal. So there is that. There's that reason that goes on too. And also too, again, like I said, a common one is that he's married and has his own family. And so he can only keep up the charade of being single, but for so long. And the other one, I think, the other lie that kind of can go into a double life is a man is emotionally unstable. So usually when there's some financial stability, in particular when they're older, there is usually some signs of emotional instability that goes along with that. Specifically, someone who can turn into Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde at a moment's notice. And that is a particularly dangerous type of person. And so a lot of women, unfortunately, don't find out till they're too late. And these are the types of men that will stalk. These are the type of men that always want to, or always feel entitled to, want to have control over their lives. And so these are the men that will be particularly cruel in their ghosting. And so you might end up feeling like, oh, this man hated me or didn't like me, only to turn around and find out that he's been stalking you this entire time. And these are the types of men that, if you remember my post that I did a few weeks ago, these are the types of men that will pop up at your house a year or 2 or 3 later. Even if you didn't give them your home address, they will feel so entitled to pop up. And if you remember on that post, I said that they were unstable. So usually with the financial instability, there's usually a double life. In particular, the older they are, there is usually something else going on that is much more sinister and could be very, very dangerous. Pay attention to the reaction, pay attention to the last interaction you had before he ghosted you, and also pay attention if he pops back up to that interaction that he has. That may give you a lot of information and sort of fill in the blanks. And I know a lot of people don't like being ghosted. I was one of those people at one time. I used to be in inner turmoil over being ghosted. I'd be like, why did he ghost me? And now I love it. You're gone. I feel fantastic. It doesn't faze me one way or the other. So a lot of women are usually caught up in that, as opposed to analyzing and picking apart some of those last couple of encounters. And if you can analyze that, a lot of times it makes a lot of sense, particularly if he's always so doggone busy. If he's so busy and doing this and that and the other, usually that means that there's another woman in the picture. He's too busy for you. That means he's usually got someone else. But, the ghosting phenomenon, sometimes, and in most cases, in my experience, and I've worked with a lot of people over this, it really isn't that hard to deconstruct. And you don't want to spend your time thinking about, you don't want to waste too much time on people who ghost. And no, he's not avoidantly attached. A lot of people get sucked into that. But he also might be, another telltale sign that he's broke, or he's not gonna do anything. And this is why it's such a hot topic right now, is that there's a low level of investment in dating. And not just, I know people are like, oh, money, money, money. I'm not talking necessarily always about money, but I'm talking about emotional investment in getting to know you and putting the steps and fostering in a relationship. And sometimes this looks like someone who's dragging their feet and never available. And on the opposite of the spectrum, it can look like someone who's trying to move things real fast. Usually if things are moving fast and they're loving you within the first week and things like that, it's going to go kaboom like a firecracker. And you also don't know a lot of times who someone is because they keep up the charade long enough to do the horizontal mambo, and then they're poof, gone like a pumpkin in the night. Hope that helps. Thanks so much. One other last thing that I want to mention in terms of the double life thing is alcohol and or drugs can also be on board, as well as sex addiction. So he may be broke because he's spending money on those types of things, and he is lost in addiction. So that's also something to keep in mind as they are living a double life. Thanks so much.